Good morning, everyone. Excited to be here today. This is the government and Web3 connection. I was really happy with this assignment because I don't think many of you or many of the participants came here today thinking that government was your Web3 answer. I'll bet that's probably true, but we're going to dispel that a bit, I think. My name is Jeff Saviano. We're going to go through a quick round of introductions. I'm a partner at EY. I lead innovation for our global tax and law practice. This is also home for me. So today, EY is sponsoring the weather today. Just want to make sure that people understand that as a beautiful day that it is. We have an advanced technology lab at EY right across the street. So we have the good fortune of being here on campus quite a bit. I have a role here at MIT. I'm a fellow in the Connection Science Lab with Sandy and also teach innovation, technology, and a future of law class across the river at Boston University. Okay, let's do a quick round of intros for this illustrious panel. Why don't we start to my immediate right, Sharad?
So my name is Sharad Sharma. I am an old Unix kernel engineer who ended up staying in the software R&D space with companies like Veritas Software, Yahoo, and others. I also did an entrepreneurial kind of a venture, which is part of Cisco now. But for the last 10 years, I've been part of something called iSpirit, which you can think of it as an IETF, a volunteer-based organization, equivalent of IETF for India. We'll talk more about it as we go along.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nelson Mills. I started my career as a PhD researcher at Trinity College Dublin, studying political theory, studying autonomy and democratic theory, and then did 6 years of operating roles. And most recently, I'm an investor with Link Ventures, where I spend the majority of my time investing in Web3.
Thank you much. Hello, everybody. My name is Roland Scharrer from AXA Insurance. AXA mainly in Europe and in Asia. Running around 100 million customers across the globe, one of the biggest commercial insurers of the world. Within AXA, I'm responsible for data and emerging technologies, so all AI implementations, all satellite implementations around that one. And when it comes to the topic that Sandy, for instance, introduced around supply chain tracking for big supply chains of this world, this is one thing what we're trying in our teams. Besides that one, driving digital commercial platforms, healthcare platforms, in various geographies, partnering with various governments and regulators.
We have a really good mix on this panel. We're excited about the diverse backgrounds from a commercial standpoint, representing insurance industry, venture capital, and funding, which we're going to talk a bit about. And Sharad, your experience in India, and we also had the good fortune, we had a symposium here earlier in the week, and I had the good fortune of hearing the story of iSpirit, and we're going to talk a bit about that today. As a way to launch into the conversation, we've been doing a bit of research and thinking about, well, what is the role of government? Do we believe that government will be critical to the proliferation and advancement of Web3 technology and solutions that we're all here for? The more that we look at it, we think this is a really complex and nuanced relationship and role that government have. And I just want to go through the 5 roles that we think government has in the proliferation of this technology. Perhaps first and foremost from a consumption standpoint. And it's been really interesting to see, especially in governments like the US with the executive order that President Biden issued at the end of 2021, calling for multiple US agencies to advance their analysis of how can we, as a consumer of this technology, how do we help societies? Because of course, we're not here to talk about government for the sake of government, right? We're talking about government for the sake of communities and the societies in general. So the first role is government as a consumer. And of course, the next, government as a regulator. We had a bit of a crash. Perhaps some would say that if you buy into the Gartner hype cycle, maybe we're in the trough of disillusionment. Along with that, we know that we're going to see increased regulation over the next 12 to 18 months. So government as a regulator is going to be critical. The third area is to incentivize, and this is my own background as a tax lawyer and for many, many years working with governments and and commercial enterprises on how do you incentivize behavior. There are thousands of incentives around the world to, whether it's an R&D tax credit or investment tax credits, to incentivize the development of this technology. Who was around in the tech space in 1996? Anybody go all the way back? Do you remember something called the Internet Tax Freedom Act? What President Clinton did. Perhaps the biggest benefit, not too many think about how taxation has helped, or in that case, how limited taxation, but President Clinton signs the Internet Tax Freedom Act that prohibited the taxation of internet access. Some say that had a role to play. The tax people in the room think it was a really important role to play in the proliferation of that technology. I love one of my favorite quotes from President Reagan: if you want less of something, tax it. If you want more of something, subsidize it. And governments are subsidizing technology development like this. So the third role is as an incentivizer. The fourth is to convene. One of the biggest questions we get in this community, governments come in to see us all the time and they have one question to ask. I don't know if you go just across the street into Kendall Square, there's a big sign at the opening of Kendall Square that says you're entering the most innovative square mile on the planet. And they've dubbed Kendall Square that because everything is concentrated and it's right here. And so many governments are asking the question, how do we replicate this? How do we replicate the startups and technologists and universities and commercial labs all here? And then lastly, somebody's got to pay for it, so government as a financier. I know it's near and dear to your heart, Nelson. How do you pay for this stuff? And government is pledging a lot of money. The EU, China, and 7 other countries together have pledged $1.5 trillion for digital transformation. Much of that we think will be in this Web3 space. Okay, so those are the 5 roles of government. Love to get thoughts from our panelists. Are those the right 5? Do you have like 7 beyond that as well? What do you think, Roland? Kick us off.
I would add here one, and this is the government is a necessary player for infrastructure for the Web3. We see that one in geographies like in Singapore, where Singapore government is incentivizing blockchain infrastructure there to have call it a baseline for building new businesses on there. Same thing in China or in Hong Kong. When you think about China, Hong Kong customs, they are now based on a blockchain way of doing things. And based on that, you can build new business on that one. I'll give you an easy example where we have struggled over the last years around that one. Maybe you remember 2020, where borders were closed and opened more or less on a weekly basis due to the pandemic situation around that one. As an insurer, we are, of course, offering flight delay insurances, or flight cancellations. You're stuck in a country and you actually want to fly back, but the flight is canceled because the borders have been closed. Something that is actually a perfect Web3 application. If flight is canceled, then prepay, rebook, restructure. A very easy application, can be built as a smart contract around that one. The tricky part is the government doesn't provide the infrastructure. I mean, they're opening and closing the borders because they're actually just making press announcements on these ones or writing paper on that. So the tricky part is how to actually incentivize also the government to providing these kind of oracles to actually drive our Web3 transformation as such and to bring that one forward. Because if you would have that kind of digital manner, you can drive these kind of piling up of flight delays quite a lot. And we had millions and millions of customers who were struggling on that one, and we had to actually enter that one manually at the end because the government did not provide this kind of information in digital format.
It's a great example. Would you necessarily need the government to act as the convener? Perhaps it could proliferate without it, but it could accelerate with it.
So, India is rich in problems. So you mentioned one problem, flight cancellation. But there are many others, right? And so in India, the idea took root that if we could reimagine the flow of people, information, and money through the system, then many problems can get solved. And to reimagine the flow of these 3 things, to your point, could some public infrastructure, and I want to make a distinction between public infrastructure and government infrastructure. All public infrastructure is not government infrastructure. All government infrastructure, on the other hand, is public infrastructure. So public infrastructure can be created. So flow of people then requires your ability to identify yourself. Today, we'll do 60 million authentications in India. Flow of money means that you can have a public utility for payments. So in India, we'll do 200 million payment transactions in a system called UPI, which is just about 5 years old. And then is information. If my information should be in my control and with consent, I should be able to send it to whoever I want. And in India, we have a new system for that, and that system is growing at a leisurely pace of 21% week on week. So, so that is an example of something that you create because it has a multiplier impact on many problems. Now, what those problems are, we'll probably talk as we go forward.
It's a great example, and would love to hear Nelson, especially, and we'll hear more about the India story and how incredible it is to see the number of people that are using these systems from a commercial standpoint and building technology companies that perhaps may align to those government rails. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, so, you know, kind of taking a quick step back, though, I just wanted to kind of answer that question about, you know, those five units. So I think one of the interesting things for us is thinking about the government not just as a consumer, but as actually an innovator and like putting building infrastructure that's core to how government's structured. I mean, I come from a democratic theory background, so actually thinking about how can we create government or create changes in democracy that would make it more equal, more accessible, more fair, where blockchain technology is core to that, where you can't do it without that. And I think there's some like really interesting possibilities there. And you know, I think the government's going to be like a huge consumer of this technology. And I would love to like talk to more companies in that space, and it's, you know, part of my interest too. But
and it doesn't just end at the consumption, right? That any other thoughts on the multiple roles that government have? What's most interesting to you in your work?
Yeah, so I think, you know, the government and consumer is super interesting, but I think like there's this hard tension, right, between like venture capital and like investing in things like, you know, like a blockchain-based voting system. Should that really be like a private enterprise, or should that be, you know, should that be something like what Bradley Tusk's doing, where he's creating a nonprofit group that's trying to build a mobile voting system. And I think there's you know, like the government should take a role in building that technology and investing in that technology, because we don't necessarily want it all in the private hands. But then there's also like types of technology the government might use, like, you know, for like Fed transactions or something like that, where very much, you know, that can be built and funded by private enterprise. But I think we have to be very careful, like looking at it from a moral and ethical standpoint, like what should be funded and owned by private enterprise and what shouldn't be. And certain parts of government infrastructure can be, and certain parts probably shouldn't be.
It's a good way to put it, and this may be a good point for us to come back and to go one layer deeper, Sharad, into the India story. And maybe if you could, to tell the story of what was the problem that you and others at iSpirit and the government was trying to solve, and maybe think about those varying roles of government. I think in your example, every one of them was probably affected.
You know, in India, what used to happen was that if the government had social services and they sent 100 rupees to somebody, most of it would get eaten up along the way, right? So the person who, the recipient, the beneficiary, and usually in a very dire state, right? So India is a small country with 300 million families. So usually that would be people in the bottom part of India with 100 million families, not much to live on. So they need those government benefits to come to them, but they won't, because they would be eaten up by people in the middle. So the first wave of change was to really use these three things that I talked about: flow of money, people, and information, to disintermediate all the players. So for example, you know, that's resulted in the largest direct benefits transfer program in the world. During COVID, we were able to give, you know, weekly money transfers to people, you know, to about 600 million people, so that they had enough to eat in a market mechanism, right? They could now go and buy stuff in the market. So therefore the leakage was very limited. So that was first wave. The second wave is to solve it for financial inclusion. Now you can only do this if people have bank accounts. So we were able to use this to give people bank accounts Bank of International Settlements has a paper on it, says India did what India did in 7 years has ordinarily taken countries 46 years to do. Same with payments. We'll do more payments, digital payments in India than US will do here. Not just US, but UK, not just UK, but also France, not just France, but also South Korea, not just South Korea, but also China, and not just any one of them, all of you put together. So now this is something that is not appreciated here, and this is not coming from a sliver of India, this is coming from mainstream India. And in 18 months or so, as I think Sandy mentioned, we'll do more transactions in India on UPI than MasterCard does worldwide. So now this is financial inclusion. Right. Now, if you can do financial inclusion, you can begin to attack education, because people can, relate education with their ability to earn money. You can relate it to health. India is, vaccinated it has done 1.88 million vaccination doses. We have far more many people vaccinated as a percentage in India than you guys have here, or Europe has in Europe. And on a routine day, we have been, or routine week, we've been vaccinating 25 million people. Using the same vaccination centers that we had that used to vaccinate 25 million babies in a year. So that's 50x productivity for you without creating any new physical infrastructure. So this is the shift that is happening. And just I'll wind up by saying that where does government come in? See, if you want to solve a problem, the belief in India, and this is a central principle of this new revolution that is happening, that we can only solve this problem with private innovation and public infrastructure. So it has required two things to be put in place: the public infrastructure that I described called India Stack, but also for private innovation. Enormous amount of money has come in, and why it has come in is because India spent time to create a single economy for labor. So you can move to any part of India, not like China where you need permission. Single economy for services, so not like AXA, if they want to operate in all 50 states, they have to go state by state. In India, you don't need to do that. And a single market for products. Yeah. So therefore, that attracts private innovation. So therefore, that's reflected in the fact that in the last few years, we have hundreds of unicorns that have come up on this system to solve India's problem.
And it is such a compelling story, and I've heard that some may look at the India story as the canary in the coal mine of government adoption of the digital rails. I'd like to think, Roland, to come back to you, and would love to get your thoughts from a commercial perspective. If a government were to take bold steps like they have, as an example, in India, what does that mean from commercial standpoint around infrastructure items like digital identity or other aspects? How could that help from a commercial perspective?
So, as working in regulated infrastructure, we are looking for private-public partnerships. In healthcare, in the way we are building pension funds and security systems around that one, there's always a private-public concept that's driving that one forward. The one thing that we're seeing in a lot of countries is currently either closing them up with their own regulations and their own way of thinking, so not allowing the free flow of goods and money around that one, or not providing the right regulation to actually have here something that can be applicable in the digital space to drive that one further. And this is what we see a lot when it comes to data exchanges. We would love to actually exchange more data between private-public institutions in a digital format, in an automated way, because that drives efficiencies for the whole society as such. And we also want to encourage more free flow of information across geographies, of course in a data privacy preserving manner, but at all enabling that one. Up to today, regulation is rather built locally, and we are struggling with problems of ensuring an Amazon supply chain that goes unfortunately across the world, or ensuring satellites that are flying across countries and they can come down everywhere. So how to actually building systems and infrastructures that allow that kind of free flow of information to build systems that are way more efficient for the society.
So think about that, Nelson, from a flow of capital standpoint in your work, and it's just an example of if government were to take these bold moves and build what in essence would be a new layer of digital public infrastructure. What does that mean from the next generation of technology companies and startups, and does it ease that investment and provide more opportunity for that next generation of tech companies?
Yeah, I mean, I think it offers a huge opportunity on some level, right? That you can build tooling on top of that that integrates it with it. It offers opportunities to use that data in commercial ways to build businesses that maybe haven't existed before. But I think there's also like tension with like some of the core tenets of Web3 and data privacy, owning your own data, et cetera, and that has to be done like very carefully if governments actually approach that. So.
It's a good way to put it. And as we think about what the Web3 stack looks like, and it's so diverse, and there are so many aspects that we're excited about in our work, I'm curious: are there one or two particular aspects of the Web3 tech stack that you're just over the moon about? You think that this is what's going to be revolutionary?
Yeah, I mean, from a government perspective, one thing I'm really excited about is soul-bound tokens. So I think like the ability actually for a soul-bound token not just to be your identity when you go to KYC at like FTX, but actually to be your government identity, right? And I think that offers a huge possibility to actually like reduce identity theft. And I think that's a great example of where the government can be a consumer, right, of technology that actually will make people's lives easier, reduce fraud, and reduce costs. So I think that's one area I'm like really excited about.
Explain what that is a bit for those who may not know what a soul-bound token is.
Yeah, so it's an NFT that basically can't be transferred, right? It lives in your wallet. It can't be. I think you could maybe burn it, but I don't think you can like destroy it. So it's basically right. You couldn't like with a normal NFT, if you tried to tie that to your identity, right? You could just like trade it to someone else, and then they could pretend to be you, right? But this way, you actually like know that as long as this person still owns the wallet, then that's that person. I think there's still like some things we have to figure out on the wallet side of making sure that you're actually verifying that person still has access to the wallet. But there's always potential for I guess security breaches still.
Always. What do you think, Roland?
One topic that bothers me personally: contracts. Contracts. We hope, and this is what we are imagining, is in the Web3 world, we're actually making smart contracts a reality. Because we are signing contracts on a daily basis. We don't know that one but sometimes. Or we're signing 50, 100 pages paper contracts, and we hope that digital transformation or the digital representation is exactly what's written down in paper. Something that bothers our industry. Imagine in insurance, we're only selling a promise. If something happens, we pay. And that is usually written down in a 100 pages contract. And that is something you're putting on your filer, and you never look at that one, only if something happens. Contracts is something that should be really transformed, and we hope that in the Web3 world, we're getting really to smart contracts, and we're driving the one forward because that drives large efficiencies in the way we're operating as such as a society.
It's a great way to explain it. And give us an example, Roland, in your work, how you're using smart contracts today in insurance.
Everything that can be decided in a deterministic manner, in a clear, structured way. Flight delays, I explained that example. Flight is delayed, you can actually execute that one. Same thing when you are insuring digital wallets, when you're insuring digital transactions, trade credit insurance, everything that is by design digital around that one. These are something we can build already in smart contracts. Unfortunately, the large chunk of our world is not that clearly designed. When it comes to liabilities, when it comes to the way we're actually managing certain conditions on car accidents. Okay, who crashed into whom here? These are very, very complex topics. So smart contracts are first steps in that direction. We hope with Web3 technology, we can enhance the way we're doing smart contracts as such.
Excellent. Great. And Sharad?
No, I'll build on what except we in India end up calling them programmability and programmable contracts. The reason is because smart contracts has ended up becoming usually on the money ledger, and therefore it's all about finance. In India, the problem that we are solving is we want a simple way to be able to ensure commercial contracts, right? And the commercial, why? Because although the Indian legal system works very well, it works very slowly. So if it's a small commercial dispute, it's not worth my while to wait 5 years for that thing to be resolved. So, and therefore that lowers business trust, and business trust, has an impact on how much business you'll do. So in India, we've managed to create a single market that I talked about. We had to re-engineer our tax system. And so therefore we have a goods ledger, or actually a tax ledger which reflects the goods ledger, which does 3 billion transactions a month. Now, I described the payment system to you, which does 6 billion transactions a month. Now, if you have to layer on top of it a programmable commercial contract, we need something that will deal with 9 billion transactions a month, and that no substrate exists to do that. So therefore, we have to build our own, and if you want to, guys, have to help us, come and do that for Badal. It's called the Bharat. Bharat is another word for India. Distributed ledger. It will start off on day one with 9 billion transactions a month. So that schema is there. It's being built on GitHub, and you can be part of this as you go forward.
Yeah, so I mean, smart contracts are key. I mean, they're the most interesting, I think, innovation in blockchain. I think that's one way we can really see the transformation of the infrastructure of government. If just imagine you vote using blockchain from your mobile phone with a smart contract. You don't just have to vote for a specific candidate. You can actually do iterative voting, right, or conditional voting, where you say, okay, I want to vote for a Democrat, or sorry, I want to vote for the Green Party, right? But if a Republican wins, then I want my vote transferred to Democrat, right? So you can actually more finely tune your preferences or something like that, right? It could be the opposite.
As an example, just by way of an example.
Just as an example.
Yeah,
so I think that's a really interesting way, though, to get to the core of people's preferences. If you can better show preferences of people in voting, that's huge, because most current democratic systems don't really do that. And kind of my whole theory there is that modern democracies actually aren't very modern because they're built using old technology, right? And our new technology can actually transform the way we think about democracy and structure democracy and make it more equal, more fair. There's also a lot of dangers there, though, too. I'm going to be clear about that.
But that experimentation with voting, and we just learned this some time ago, that in our last presidential election, members of the armed forces who were overseas actually voted on a blockchain. And it went very well, and there was no fraud identified, and it was a progressive system. And you're right, it has an opportunity through programmability to really change how we vote. Okay, we're down to our last 2 minutes. Everybody loves predictions. Give us your best prediction, what the next 12 months in this space.
12 months?
12 months, yeah, in the next 12 months. What are we going to see?
Government transformations, okay.
Come on.
That's what I was thinking, too. Nothing's going to happen in 12 months. In 12 months in the government space, and it's hard to say. I think it's honestly too short of a timeline. But I do hope next 10 years we'll see a vastly more people voting on blockchain on mobile, right? They don't have to go line up a ballot box. Everyone can vote no matter where you are, what you're doing, and I think that'll transform participation in democracy.
The Web3 world moves fast. I asked for a year, and it's interesting that you went to 10 years. Do you think that government can ever accelerate? Let's face it, sometimes the wheels of government don't turn that quickly. It sounds like, Nelson, you don't believe it could go that fast.
There are governments that are accelerating, that are majorly accelerating. When you see the transformation that's happening in Singapore or in Hong Kong, China, there's an acceleration happening, and there's speed like hell. Definitely the case, and you see applications on especially customs and tax that are deployed largely and adopted by the citizens of the state.
What do those governments all share in common? They're all autocratic. Which is interesting.
I don't want that to be the final word from the panel. Sharad, give us your prediction.
Broad definition of web decentralized. Decentralized means it's multi-party. If it's multi-party, you need a protocol to bring all parties together, and then you need policies so that's open networks are there. And so if you apply that to data, then you have federated data, and yet a 360-degree view of that data in the hands of the data user. And that is the Indian system called DEPA. my prediction is that 1 year from now, India, of course, will be using it at scale, and enough countries that will account for 200 million citizens will also be using it. I will not mention which those countries are, but they will also be using it.
What a great point to anchor on. You're a great panel. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.